The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Project and Program Management Career Path Transition to a Product Leader. And our guest speaker today is Professor Pinkesh Shah. He's the Director, Programs, Institute of Product Leadership. Pinkesh Shah is a Silicon Valley executive who has been a product management executive for the last 14 years in the US. Most recently, he was the Global Vice President of Product Management at McAfee RNC BU, which is now acquired by Intel. Having played a key role in understanding how global products have to be adapted to work in emerging markets, he also started the product management organization in McAfee, India. He is a guest faculty at several B schools like IIM Bangalore, Amsterdam University, etc. He is an angel investor and is currently one of the founding board member at Institute of Product Leadership, a business school focused on technology professionals. So, without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Pinkesh.
Hey, thanks, Anuradha, for the lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. Hope the audio is not choppy and is clear. Anuradha, it's all good on your side?
This is Aradhana, and you can continue with the session. Your voice is loud and clear.
Super. Hey, thanks. Okay, so today's topic of what they've asked me to speak on is really a topic that we've seen a lot more in action as people transition from one function to another, specifically around project management, program management, specifically in the IT services sector or product companies, and how they sometimes accidentally move into product management, product leadership roles, and often very systematically plan that. So I'm going to share with you what we've seen in the last 2 years of running this institute, where predominantly a large population of engineering professionals come and join several business programs which are very specifically targeted around product leadership skills, product mindset, product skill set. I also teach at the institute on the area of product management. One of the other interesting aspects of, I guess, my own story is that I'm a hardcore engineering guy at heart and by profession and by education, and moved into product management rather accidentally about 9-10 years ago in the US. And so I can kind of relate to a lot of the journey that some of you and many others are on as you kind of map your career and plan it as opposed to kind of waiting for accidents to happen. So that's kind of more of a candid discussion that we can have. I also try to make it fairly interactive, so please don't wait till the last section or the last aspect of the program. Please feel free to ask questions, and I'm sure the moderator will intervene at the right time and just ask us to see if we can answer some of those questions as we go along. That's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about the institute. Essentially, it's a B school for techies, for lack of a better word, and I encourage you to check it out at productleadership.in. So the agenda for today really is kind of a quick discussion on careers, and this is a very frequently asked question to me, especially when I hire product management, when I interact with a lot of PMI bodies and chapters around the country, around the world, as to kind of what their view, sometimes a mythical view of what a career is, especially in the context of India. Then we'll talk a little bit about what is the different mindset. I mean, skill set I think is straightforward and clear, but what's the difference in mindset between a project professional and a product professional? And then I'll maybe share 5 practical tips on how you can start thinking like a product leader, acting like a product leader, executing like a product leader, even with your current role, current job, current company. And then I'll maybe introduce you some quick 5 steps on how to systematically look at this world of product innovation, product design, and a lot of other product-related DNA that you see in some companies. Right? So let's start with the competencies, and obviously all of you are probably very senior and familiar with this space, but there's a stark contrast in terms of the competencies that you see in a typical senior program manager versus a senior product manager. While on the project management side, it's all about execution, scheduling, maintenance, risk management, stakeholder management, communication of status, kind of managing resources. A lot of those are extremely critical aspects of any project or any product which is being created as part of a company. On the product management side, you see a lot more focus, though, on the customer insights. And these customers might not be internal. More than likely, they're external. Right? So external customer insights. And customer insights is different than customer research, by the way. Right? So you might have also heard of this role called business analyst, where the role primarily might be going after the customer, speaking with them, translating those requirements or what they hear back into implementable roadmap or implementable UML diagrams. To me, that's a start, but that's much a smaller subset of what we call customer insights, because insights is about things that the customer is not even telling you. The fundamental premise is most customers don't know what they really want, and so if they don't know what they want, it's going to be very difficult for them to articulate what they want. And even if they do articulate what they want, at the end of the day, it is our ability to distill this down and reduce it down to what market problems are really making them feel the pain, right? As opposed to the symptoms of what they're asking us to go big. And this is what I call, more detailed customer insights. But you also have to go beyond just the inbound product management, as we call, into outbound product management, right? How do you build the product? How do you conceive it? How do you validate it? How do you build a financial model that makes sense for the organization's risk appetite to be able to get it approved? And then comes the execution part, which is where project managers get very active, right? So once the project is commissioned, how do you build it right, build it with the right resources, build it with the right schedule, with the right quality, all of those. And after you build it, finally, how do you go to market? How do you position it? How do you go to market with it? How do you brand it, message it? All of those are essentially the necessary competencies that we see is extremely critical for you to kind of move into more of a techno-business role, right? And often called as the product manager, product marketing role. So I just wanted to kind of quickly bring this up upfront in terms of the comparison of different competencies, and there's a fair amount of overlap. The good news is, risk management, communication skills, leadership skills, conflict management skills, these are extremely critical for both roles. These are extremely, also common in the portfolio of competencies that you would see, one versus the other. But there's a lot more in product management. And if you look at a more broader, structured view of how, product management competencies are understood, they're really into 5 categories. One is what we call, hey, how do you decide which idea to go build? How do you go decide on which idea to go validate, right? So there's a lot of choosing, especially in a large company where you have lots of ideas, and especially in a startup where essentially you're bustling with new innovative things that you could do. How do you prioritize? How do you choose? So market analysis is a very, very important category skill that as a product manager, as a product leader, you really need to develop. The second one, which is extremely critical as well, is asking the fundamental question, hey, can we make money with this? Is this business model making sense? The idea makes sense. The early validation says that everybody wants this widget or this service or this new box or this new product that you have conceived, the early validation says, this is great, we need it, but can you actually make money, right? What's the long-term plan beyond the first version, the second version of the release? So this is the area of what we call the strategic planning. As you go down the wheel, the third, and which is where about 70% of all product managers actually spend their time. I'm going to share some statistics with you on a research that was commissioned last year and was also released in NASSCOM, where where do people work for, which competencies are missing, even for existing product managers, existing product leaders, right? This will give you an insight for those who are long-term thinking about moving into a more broader role, beyond program management, beyond project management, right? So product planning is one of those areas where 71% of the participants in the Indian ecosystem spend their time. It's alarmingly high. A part of it's also because a lot of the product managers come from a very technology background, a very engineering-centric background, and so it's very natural for them to gravitate towards this section of the skill, which is everything about the persona definition, writing requirements, prioritizing those requirements, instituting the development processes or assisting in the development processes from a Scrum meetings or Agile, if you follow Agile in your organization, versus Waterfall. All of these are important areas. User experience design. So these are important skills and competencies as part of the product planning. And the next one is go-to-market, which is everything from product positioning. Who is this product for, and how do you communicate that value that you've built? And more importantly, how do you communicate that value to the right audience at the right time, using the right channel with the right message? Right? So these things are important as you go further in the product lifecycle management, because at the end of the day, building something that does not have a clear go-to-market will certainly not be a successful venture, a successful product, a successful solution in the market. And the last one, which is also very critical, especially as you grow in mid-sized or larger companies, is how do you enable sales, right? How do you enable channel? How do you enable partners? If you have to go and position the merit of your product and get the first 10 customers to buy, it's relatively a straightforward process, because you are so-called the expert, right? As a project manager, as a product leader, you know the inside out of what you've built as a solution. So it's much easier for you to pitch. It's much easier for you to position and all of that, right? However, how do you do this, with a third-party person, right? How does that Samsung product manager sitting in Korea define what should the retail salesperson at a local Chroma store, right? In a local electronic store, what are the 3 things that he or she has to talk about as you pitch the product? There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of design that you have to go figure things out as you go roll out these products. So this is extremely critical for you to also build the skills around thought leadership, channel, sales training, customer relationship management, not so much the support of the customer, but also managing the life cycle of the customer. How do you upsell, cross-sell? How do you position, delight? What they might have liked in your product today might be different 2 releases later. So how do you continuously understand? How do you build a lead generation plan? How do you build the right collaterals? All of these are extremely critical skills. So if you broadly look at the product leadership, you can kind of divide that up into 2 aspects. One is what we call product management, also sometimes referred as the inbound marketing. The second one is what we call product marketing, or sometimes also called the outbound product management versus the inbound product management. The engineering-centric product management or technology-centric product management versus the market-centric product management. Different terms, different words people use, but essentially this is that wheel of competencies that one has to really look for, really do a gap analysis, and try to figure out which of these do they map out to, because at the end of the day, a global product leader will be required to exercise a lot of these skills at work, whether it's your own entrepreneurial venture or you're actually leading and managing the life cycle of a product in a larger company or a solution in a larger company. And by the way, so when we use the word product, it's broad enough in our context that it doesn't have to be just the physical products. It could be products which are offered as a service, right? A lot of cloud-based products are actually, services. They're software as a service. The name itself suggests, right? SaaS. So this is equally applicable to a lot of solutions, services-led products, product-led services. All of that. This is equally relevant, in the context of what we're discussing. So, one other interesting thing about careers, and this is a question that we get asked a lot, is, careers have essentially, two aspects or dimensions. One is the hierarchical movement, the movement of moving up, the movement of feeling elated because your titles have changed, your potential, wealth generation has moved up or has increased. And so this is the typical view of a career that we all sometimes subscribe to, which is, how many people do I manage? How many projects do I manage, right? As a program manager, you might have multiple projects. And that's one way of looking at career, which is, what we call a hierarchical view. The second very important way of looking at career, and this is very relevant in the context of product companies especially, and product leadership type of roles, is the role of what we call, is your career moving beyond just the number of people you manage to the number of people you can influence. So this is what we call the scope of influence-based career path, right? So a career where, you have a lot more impact, you have a lot more responsibility, you have a lot more influence over decision makings. And they both doesn't have to tie to each other, right? Sometimes they are, but leading by authority doesn't have to be always tied or is always the same as leading by influence. And so this is very important to understand as we discuss career, as we talk about, transitioning, as we talk about, developing these skill sets. It's also important to understand the end goal, right? The end goal can't always be measured by, kitne aadmi hai, how many people do I really manage, or how many people is in my team, or that's usually not how most product managers, by the way, are managed. And by the way, their wealth or their ability to participate, in financial progress has nothing to do, in most cases, has absolutely nothing to do with the number of people they manage. It is everything to do about, are you a responsible, authoritative, accountability-driven individual who can influence the entire organization, who can influence an entire set of teams, those who don't even report to you, those who don't have a reason to even listen to you. So that's a lot more important. So just kind of keep that view in mind as you look at career in multiple dimensions, right? One is the upward mobility, the levels in the organization, as you call, which is usually characterized by more money, more number of people, number of projects. Second is the scope of influence. And the scope of influence is not just for fun. Obviously, there is a lot more financial wealth generation even in that role. But they might not be the same, right? So just keep that in mind as you kind of look at that career anchors and the competency that you build. Here's some research that was done that I promised to share, and I'll kind of let you glance through this. This is the second annual baseline report that was done for all product manager, product marketing professionals in India. Roughly about 400 plus people were interviewed and surveyed to develop, hey, what is the state of product management, product leadership roles, career path in India, specifically in the Indian context. This research was commissioned because very few research reports were available, or a lot of data was not quantified up until now. So this is what the research, and you can download the full report from the website. So here's some interesting statistics on, how people view what they do, all the way down to how many emails do they read, how many hours do they work, and so on and so forth. Right? So just kind of give you a flavor of the state of the union or the ground reality of this career path in India. And by the way, do post your questions, and if there are some that we can answer right away, would be happy to answer that right away as well. Yeah? Okay, so 3 different trips. I wanna hopefully you got a glance over and kind of see some of these things. You can also see from the graph here that MNCs are a lot more mature in terms of their hiring, in terms of their definition of the role, in terms of the maturity or the clarity of how you move up in the organization in a product management versus startups. Startups tend to be a little bit chaotic. On the positive side, if you're looking at a role of moving into a startup in a product leadership type of role, the amount of A, freedom, and B, the scope is obviously going to be a lot more exciting in certain scenarios than maybe an MNC, right? Because in an MNC, a lot of that culture might be still driven, a lot of the decisions might be still driven out of your headquarters, in Europe or US or wherever it is. Whereas in a startup, there isn't a whole lot of people to look around you. You end up doing everything, and so it allows you to kind of a broader exposure, a bigger spectrum of what can be done or can be achieved from a startup perspective. Okay, so 3 tips I want to share with you. Again, specifically in the context of India, and what we've seen with hundreds of professionals who we've been in touch with. Obviously, I was hiring manager, so I set up product management from scratch. We helped several companies, set product management. So this is our kind of understanding of how things certainly work. Right. So 3 things, if I distill this down, one is, hey, don't confuse the product management role with the title, which means some companies will have very interesting titles, very creative, business card decorations, if I may. So don't confuse title with the actual role. What we've been discussing so far is really the role, and what we will continue to discuss moving forward is really talking about the role, because titles are dependent on each company, right? I mean, there are very creative titles, as creative as a requirement scientist. I am not kidding. This is a real title for a real product manager in a company that I think most of you would have heard of. The guy essentially said, look, requirements is what I do. Scientist is what is considered higher cultural value from a title perspective. So he went to HR and said, hey, look, I need to be called requirement scientist. So there you go. He's got that title now. So don't confuse the role with the title. Second, when you look at product manager, when you look at product management as a what is expected to have, right? From a hiring manager perspective, what are the kind of things you are expected to have? There are essentially 3 things. When a hiring manager looks at it, and this is important for you yourself to evaluate as you kind of get ready to start playing that role within your own company, right? Within your own structure, within your own wherever you are. First is your domain skills. Do you understand the domain you're in? Do you have enough empathy for the customer? So the domains could be anything from e-commerce to manufacturing to mobile apps to enterprise software to routing and telecommunications. Could be anything, right? So the first is do you have enough domain skills for that particular company or the geography or the region that you're now held accountable for. Second is functional skills. Functional skills are all the skills that we just finished talking about, from market analysis to strategic planning, right? User experience design, requirements management, positioning. All of these are functional skills. These are best practices and frameworks which allow you to make better decisions. How do you prioritize? Multiple stakeholders, multiple customers, they all want conflicting things. How do you prioritize, right? So these are all functional skills. And the third one is extremely critical as well, is what we kind of lump them into what we call a leadership skills. So this is, hey, do you have what it takes to present to senior executives and get buy-in? Can you convince a VC to put money into your venture? Can you convince your upper management team to fund the 3 engineers that you want for your project? You know, do you have negotiation skills to resolve conflict between stakeholders, between team members? The storytelling technique, how good are you in presenting facts and data? All of these are extremely important leadership skills. So those are the kind of 3 things that we look for in a product leader, product manager. And the third tip that I can give you and advice kind of from the trenches is, can you build a demonstrable set of competencies? Can you build a portfolio of certain skill sets before you actually interview, before you consider, or before you even talk to anyone formally about moving into this role? This role is highly hands-on and practical role, right? So think of this as like a mini CEO. I mean, essentially, you're like a mini CEO of that product, if not the company. And so now, when somebody is hiring, when somebody is considering you to move into that role, the first question they're going to ask, whether it's a formal interview or otherwise, is, hey, what have you done? What kind of things can you demonstrate or show? And this is very important, sometimes often overlooked by many, many senior professionals who take a viewpoint of entitlement. I've been in the company for 10 years. I know e-commerce, and hence I'm ready for the job, right? I'm from certain school. I've done my MBA from certain place, and hence I'm ready for this job. So the entitlement view, which is I'm entitled to this, I think is a very risky bet. My recommendation is to flip that around and almost create a view, instead of entitlement, a demonstrable view. Here's what I've done, and hence I need this job. Here's what I'm doing already, hence I need to formally move into this role. This is extremely critical because there is really no prerequisites per se on who can become a product manager. So you don't have to go to a certain school or a certain college or a certain, go through, your last name doesn't have to start with an S. None of these things matter. At the end of the day, a hiring manager is looking at, can you really perform the role of product management and demonstrate the skill sets? So this is extremely important, that I can share with you kind of 3 things as you think through and move your own mindset and skill set towards a product leadership role. Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to share 5 tips now, and let's see if we can do this a little bit more interactive. I'm going to throw a question at some of you in the next 5 minutes to get your view on how you feel and how you think about certain things, and see if I can spark your mind with certain curiosity, and obviously create a dialogue and make you ask questions in that context, right? So first tip, as you move from a product, as you move from a project mindset, program management career path to a more truly product or a strategic decision maker type of role, always start with the customer context. That's your number 1 strength. That's your number 1 area that you want to be mastering on, focused on, and so on and so forth, right? So always start with the customer context. Now with that, let me throw a quick quiz in front of you. So everybody knows the figure that you see in front of your screen now. If you don't, we have a different problem, and there'll be a different webinar to explain that. But I'm assuming that everyone kind of know this figure who you see. Now obviously, this is Gandhi, the father of the nation. And when he started announcing the Dandi March, which some of you might remember from your history, a movement that he started by gathering a bunch of people, rallying around a bunch of common people on the street, and kind of walking down on a predefined date to get some salt from Dandi, which is this place in Gujarat, and really signal to the Britishers that this is time for you to leave, right? Now, while this is a very interesting lesson in the history, we're trying to spark some product management mindset in with you right now by using this example. So, if you can put the first poll question on the screen for the audience. Here's the question. So when Gandhi announced this particular idea of, by the way, and in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, by the way, Gandhiji is one of the best examples of what I call an awesome product manager, right? Nobody reports to him, which is true for every product manager, and yet he mobilized an entire nation against all odds to get what he wanted to get done, right? So that's essentially the trait of a product manager. So to me, he's like a super product manager. Now, when he announced this, he caused ripples in the rest of the freedom fighter circles. So one of them was Motilal Nehru, and he wrote a telegram to him saying that, look, what are you possibly going to do by lifting a pinch of salt? This makes no sense. I mean, there are, why are you doing this? I don't get it. Now, this is interesting, right? So my question to all of you, if you can get the poll question, please. The organizer, can you throw the poll question, please?
Aren't you able to see it? It's already there. So if you can quickly take, people have started to take the poll. It's why didn't many others get the point of Salt March?
Super. So I can't see it for some reason. But that's okay. If you just want to show the results when it's done, then maybe you can just verbalize the result, because somehow I'm not able to see the poll.
All right. So I would request the attendees to take the poll. Why didn't many others get the point of Salt March? So the first poll option would be didn't have a real pulse of the public. Second, didn't really think Gandhi was serious about it. And third, there were already many unexecuted good ideas. Can we close the poll now, Pinkesh?
Yep, we can.
All right. Would you like to know the result?
Yes, please.
So 60% of our audience said didn't have a real pulse of the public. 29% said there were already many unexecuted. And 7% said didn't really think Gandhi was serious about it.
Excellent. So the majority of you essentially got the point, and the point was, Motilal Nehru and many others who were passionate about the country, who were equally, involved in the freedom fighting struggle, sitting in the ivory tower where they were, really could not understand the pulse of the customer. And that's exactly why Gandhi, if you remember, had traveled for at least 3 to 4 months in a third-class compartment is the first thing that he did when he came from overseas, to really understand the customer context, to understand who these people are, what their pain point is, and you can't really do that sitting in your office. You have to get out, you have to interact, you have to understand, you have to empathize with the customer. And that's exactly why a lot of people missed the brilliance of what Gandhi did, which is to connect the common man, where salt is really one of those common connections across the struggle, to unite and kind of bring people as a cause to get and kind of join the movement, right? So this is extremely important. Lessons from history can teach us a lot in the context of customers and product management concepts, right? But that's essentially what we're sharing with you as tip number 1. So these customer context has to be buyer versus user. This has to be, across the spectrum. Essentially, who's the customer, why do they care, how do I monetize it, and so on and so forth, right? Here's another example, right? Sometimes we look at also the problems of the customer in a very ephemeral way. So one way of creating the next version of this camera is to add 10x zoom, 50x zoom, 30x zoom, different colors, more, wide angle, or you go back and create this new product which is called a litro, because the fundamental problem that we have today is really, how do I take pictures, without not having the availability of the camera when I really want it. Number two, I don't want to decide what aperture speed and what shutter speed. I just want to click and later decide, right? So here's a product that just got released a few months ago called Litro. You can all Google this up. And essentially it is as big or as small as you see. It's only having one button, click, and every single parameter of light is now being stored, which is a huge file, but storage is cheap now. And then later you can decide, so you never miss a moment. This camera will also last for 40 days after you charge it once. So it's a very disruptive way of looking at it, and all these things are only possible when you start developing a customer context, as opposed to just looking at what others are doing and trying to innovate, trying to implement. Okay, so there's some questions which are piling up, so I'm going to take a quick one or two from here and then move on to the second tip. In fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we throw the second poll question and let people take the poll while I answer some of the questions that have accumulated here. Can we have the second poll, please?
Minkesh, it's up.
Okay,
so
super.
The poll question this time is, which of the following companies are inventive? Would you like to tell them the options they have?
Yeah, so I think the options are also listed there, isn't it? So let's say Flipkart, Dell, Indigo Airlines, none of the above, or all of the above. So which of these companies do you believe are inventive, right? They've done something remarkably different and very novel from an invention perspective. So I'm going to take a few questions while people take the poll, just to keep it moving and stay productive with the time. What is the basic criteria? Rajan Agrawal asks, what's the basic criteria to judge one as a project manager or a product manager? So, again, it goes back to the competency, Rajan, right? So the way to judge or way to evaluate, judge is probably a bad word. Nobody should be judged. We all have different skills. But if you're being evaluated for a program manager versus a product manager, again, the 5 categories of skills is what we want to know when we interview, right? So do you have enough, empathy for the customer? Can you explain to me the 11 different techniques of validation? Do you understand the difference between discovery kind of customer research and validation kind of customer research, right? So if you go back, market analysis, strategic planning, product planning, go-to-market, and sales enablement. These are 5 categories of skills that we will really be evaluating you on. Whereas a project manager, the interview might look very different. The skills that they would want would be very different, right? Meticulousness, nature, prompt response, communication skills, which are also important, but that's a lot more important in a project role. Yeah. Milan had a question on one of the charts that we showed in the infographic, that from 2011 to 2013, looks like the number of hours of work and the number of meetings have gone up on an average for a product manager. So what does that mean? Well, I guess what that means is a lot more work. So product managers are definitely very heavy hard-working guys or gals, and that just shows that sometimes perhaps it's not a good sign that even though the work is increasing, you're doing a lot more inbound work, a lot more sitting in the office type of work than perhaps outside. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question, Milan. Can we show the results now?
Yes, of course. So are you able to see the results? in your screen, Pinkesh?
Unfortunately, I'm not. So I'm going to
Oh,
have to rely on you to summarize.
all right. So, which of the following companies are inventive? And 54% of the audience would say Flipkart. 26% are saying all of the above. 25% are saying Dell. 13% are saying Indigo. And only 9% are saying none of the above.
So this is very interesting. Now, obviously, it's a controversial discussion, one that will take a whole different webinar on its own. But here's where most management gurus would agree that the actual 9% of the people got it right. While it's a very innovative nature of companies, and each one of these have, disrupted the industry that they were in, right? Flipkart obviously is our own home darling story out of India now. Dell, they disrupted the way, the big IBMs and the HPs were doing business. A lot of their innovation came from process innovation, not necessarily technology invention, right? And so what's important here to understand sometimes that as a product leader, we often go and find that silver nugget, that disruptive, inventive, never done before type of thing, where all you really have to do is figure out the unsolved problem, right? For Dell, the unsolved problem was, I want to be able to order and customize my own laptop and bring it back into my home at a very affordable price. That's the problem that they attacked. For Flipkart, you can argue the number one, disruptive thing they did in the Indian style of e-commerce, even though e-commerce had been done for many, many years before Flipkart did anything, was cash on delivery, right? Because the Indian customer really does not want to believe the fact that I'm going to pay up front and then get the goods later, especially when the brand is not big. So cash on delivery was their innovation. So all of these will only come when you are actually close to the customer, understand their pain point, and how do you prioritize unsolved problems. Unaddressed pain point is essentially the key to product mindset, to product thinking, product leadership thinking. The third one, as we go along and just kind of wrap this up for more Q&A, try to identify the real problems. And let me, instead of giving you a lot of tips on this, let me throw the next poll, which allows you to kind of say that, look, here is a fantastic, product that you see in front of you from a screen perspective, which is an amazing, a refrigerator that is a technological marvel of its own, right? They did research in terms of why people open the fridge, and turns out 30% of the times we open the fridge just to find out what's inside the fridge. Every time you open the fridge, the electricity escapes, the cold air escapes, and now you have to burn more electricity to keep that fridge alive. So 30% of your energy savings can happen by not opening the door of the fridge on a day-to-day basis to just check whether you have enough fruit, whether you're out of eggs, whether you have enough milk before you go to the grocery store, right? All of us can relate to, this type of scenario in our own homes. So the question is, in front of you, I guess the poll is already live, I'm assuming. Yeah, and so the question really is, which of these drivers do you think caused this product to really succeed, to really become a killer product? So while we take the poll, I'm going to answer one or two more questions. This question comes from Raj. So Raj says, I have to make my career in product line because I'm working in a product since 9 years in MNC. Okay, so I don't know if that's a question or if it's a statement that you're making, Raj, but yes, I would agree. By virtue of you being in a product MNC or an MNC that is doing some kind of solution work, almost warrants you to start thinking like a product leader, right? Because whether you're in that role or not, you will become a lot more relevant in that company if you understand the context of the company, understand the context of the products that the company is making. So I would strongly recommend you looking at that aspect and that role. Many people, many participants who we've seen transform, go from project management to product management already. So this is highly, highly doable. I strongly encourage you to start thinking that way. Okay, I'm going to take one more question. So this question is, I think, from Santosh, which is similar to what we had answered earlier, Santosh. How different is a product management role than program management? I'll give you one more example if that gives some more clarity, right? So if you have to start a new train from here to Bangalore to Chennai, let's say. Now, how many train stops should the train make? What should be the price of the ticket? What time of the day should it start? All these are decisions around the product, which a product manager will make. Once the train is commissioned, to make sure that it runs on time, to make sure that it has double the guard, a backup plan for every driver who falls sick so that the train never gets late, all of that is project management, program management. So again, it's a very simple example, but hopefully it gives you the contrast between the two. Yeah, okay, do you want to talk about the results of the poll?
Yes, sure. So this time, which of the following reasons made the product a killer success? And 57% of attendees are saying 30% energy savings, since you can see through. 25% are saying lighter titanium body with 10 plus durability. 55% are saying new features at competitive price. 20% are saying bottom freezer for lighter load on cooling, and 15% are saying mobility with easy wheels.
Excellent, very good thinking. So it's a little bit of a trick question because, from a case perspective, when this got launched from Korea, this is one of those large, brands. All of you know the name if I tell you, which I'm not going to tell you, but think of it, it's a large company who released this in the US when it came out, and it was an utter failure. And the utter failure is not because there was any lack of features or lack of capabilities that were built in. In fact, there were amazing things that were built in. But the reason it failed is because the mental model of a fridge is what you see on the right. Right? And so when you have to, look at a fridge, and that fridge is essentially, a communication vehicle for your house, which all of a sudden went away the moment you start putting some amazing engineering capable product. Essentially, you have not understood the mental model. And it is this mental model that essentially brings to our fourth point, which is user experience is really nothing but those who can break the mental models. Those who can create an element of surprise based on how they use it in a certain way and create something that is creating a delight, creating a surprise element. And that's the new differentiation. So that's the fourth tip that I can share with you, is your mindset needs to start developing, more around, how do I delight the customer? What is the overall experience of my, customer look like? Here's an object that all of you have seen. Many of you have probably used this. And I'll leave you with a hint without giving you the answer, and feel free to connect with me, send me an email, happy to share, the answer key if you will. But this is the most horribly designed product of our times. Even though none of us were complaining until I brought this up in front of you, and most of the people are still happily living, happily ever after using this product. Technically speaking, this is the worst, one of the worst designed products in our lifetime, right? Now it is this ability to go beyond the features, to go beyond the product, and to understand the mental model of the customer, and as to why they are, why there is inefficiency in the way they do certain things, is really the customer research, is really the product leadership that we're talking about when it comes to user experience. So happy to hear from all of you offline why you think is the worst product of from a design perspective, right? By the way, more is not better, right? So that's kind of the new mantra, as we kind of also look at is the tip number 5, which is countering to the common sense. In fact, most products that you see here, other than they all being from Apple, they all share one common thing, and that one thing is they all have 30% to 35% less features, less capabilities than most other leaders or competitors that they have in each of these categories. So this is interesting that I have less features, almost as high as 30%, and I'm still the leader in my category, and I can still delight people. I can still do this, right? So Apple does this very consistently across all products. And many companies do this fairly well, by the way, in B2B as well as in B2C. Right? So that's kind of my fifth tip. More is not better. So in summary, here are the the 5 takeaways for you as you start transitioning into a product leadership mindset. The 5 phases of how you productize this journey is really here, is what we call the 5 steps of the value journey, which is what we've already discussed. Everything from market analysis to strategic planning, to product planning, to communication of value, which is go to market, to finally sales enablement. So as long as you understand the 5 phases of the productizing process and you start mastering them, and the other 5 tips kind of help you start thinking, you're already on the way, irrespective of the role, irrespective of the title that you hold, you're already on your way towards thinking like a product leader. Now, there's also a very interesting, interlock between these constituents of what we call project managers and product managers. And so, as you go through the development process, in a very simplistic view, as you conceive, you go plan, then you develop, then you qualify and test, then you launch the product, and then finally you deliver the product. As you notice in the bottom, you have different people taking different roles, and different interlock happens as you work across the team. So this is also important because these things are not built in a vacuum. At the end of the day, it's teamwork, and there's a fair amount of overlap between what a program manager might do and what a product manager might do. Right? So with that, I'm going to end. Take any more questions and kind of go answer things that it's on your mind. But my final parting advice to you is, step away from project execution when it comes to resource, when it comes to feature management, and start thinking from a customer delight perspective, right? Your job as a product leader is very different than that as a project manager. Your job as a product leader is to define the best experience possible, create delight across the productizing process, across all 5 phases. So if you look at these 2 products, they both have quote unquote the same material, the same quantity even. Yet the bottle of ketchup on the right is 20% higher priced. And people are, by the way, willing to pay happily 20% higher than the ketchup bottle on the left. Right? So a project manager's view might be to get the specs done, follow what was given and deliver to that spec, which is the left. The product manager, on the other hand, our job and the product leader's job is to really focus more on the right. Even though they both are building their product and their company around the same internal material, same internal features, same internal code. I mean, for those who are technology oriented guys on this call, both these products essentially have the same code inside it. So technology is not the differentiator here. Code is not the differentiator, right? It's the entire delight across the productizing process is really the differentiator. Right? So with that, I'm going to go to the last slide. That's my email. Happy to connect with all of you on LinkedIn, which is a wonderful way to stay connected. Happy to get some questions answered right now, and even offline if we can't get to all of them here right now today.
Yes, thanks for the insightful presentation. But due to time constraint, I have to request you, Pinkesh, to at least take few of the question now, and the unanswered question I will share with you offline, which you can respond through email.
Sure, that's fine. Okay, do you want to select the questions, or should I just go ahead and pick a few that I can?
Sort them through.
Okay, so I'm going to start with kind of bottoms up here. So first, the bottom question here is from Sujata. So Sujata's question is, when a product manager is moved into this role and is expected to do product management with no knowledge of the product, can this person really be a successful product manager? So the answer is absolutely yes, and it also depends on who you are and what kind of product you're in. Certain products require a much higher domain expertise than others. But the question that I would ask Sujata in this scenario is, it's not about the knowledge of the product. It's about the knowledge of the problems that the customers of that product are facing, which is more important for you as a product manager to understand. So the knowledge of the product itself is very easy, relatively speaking, to learn at a high level. You don't have to be an expert in your product. As long as you can speak top 5 reasons of why people buy and top 4 reasons why people use your product, you're already there. So that can happen literally over a week. What is hard to do, which is important to also develop the skill for, is who's the customer for this product and what does their life look like? What are their unsolved problems? What segments should we be focused on, right? What are the alternatives from a competitive landscape that exist from a customer perspective? So these are all important questions to ask before you ask the question, can you know enough about the product? Because that's easy, and yes, you can become a great product manager even though you know very little about the product in the initial stage, as long as you ramp up quickly. Second question here from Sagar. How does product management help tech savvies to build career paths? So, tech savvy guys are actually probably the most probable candidates for product management, Sagar, right? One of the other surveys in the baseline survey research that we showed earlier, one thing that also came out as part of the IPL research that they had done is that 96% of all product managers in India are either technological savvy. And so the question asked was, do you consider yourself technical, very technical, or not technical? And 96% gave the combined answer of technical or very technical. So that tells you that having the domain expertise, having the technology bandwidth and the background is actually an asset as you move in, because as you move into product management, you might start moving more around what we call the requirements definition, and so that requires a lot of understanding of how the technology is used to build. But over time, you also need to build the go-to-market skills, the sales enablement skills, the positioning skills, the pricing skills, which are not necessarily something that you might have learned as a tech-savvy career. So you can start there, but you of course you need to move up and kind of build the other competencies as well. Karuna, I think, asked the same question as somebody else, which is, is domain skills absolutely necessary? Again, 3 things, Karuna and the rest of the gang, right? So 3 things that we look for in a product manager when we hire. One is domain, second is functional skills, and third is leadership skills. Now, this is a great question to ask the interviewer themselves that, look, what proportion of these 3 things are you looking for? Because there are some times where we have enough domain experts in the team, and what we need is somebody who can manage the stakeholders, somebody who can present it to customers, and so we need more heavy on leadership skills. Sometimes our teams are so off balance that everybody is an amazing leadership skill, everybody is an amazing product manager, but nobody is from the domain. So we might be hiring 1 or 2 product managers to complement the team with very heavy focus on the domain. So it really depends on who you're interviewing with and what company and what team that you're about to join. But it's not absolutely necessary. It is one of the 3 things that you do need, Karuna, as you move into a product role. How can project management contribute is Priyanka's question to the growth of startups and small organizations. Startups and small organizations don't have any necessarily a different way. They just have little time. But they still have the same productizing process that they follow, right? But in a very compressed time schedule. So whatever we've discussed is equally relevant in a small organization, is equally relevant in a startup type of environment. Yeah. Okay, so I think if that's pretty much the time is up, then happy to take some questions offline and And do connect with us. Happy to chat with you guys over the questions that you can put on the forum here as well. So it was great presenting and talking to some of you, even though it's virtual. Hope you guys can spark your thought, and hope this sparks enough in your mind to kind of start considering, start thinking about the journey. And it might not happen overnight, but boy, the moment you start, it's more of a mindset change than skill set, because skill sets are not that difficult to learn. So with that, I wish you all the very best, and happy to be here.
And I'm really thankful to our guest speaker today for conducting this wonderful webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Pinkesh, for taking the time out. I hope you have a great evening ahead.
Absolutely, wish you all the same.